Have you ever noticed that some of the world's most respected atheist philosophers seem uneasy when the topic of consciousness comes up? Not angry. Not defensive. Just uneasy. As if they're staring at something they can't quite escape. Something that feels too close. Too fundamental. Too revealing. Tonight, I want to walk with you into that uneasy space. Into what many atheist thinkers themselves admit is the hardest argument to ignore. Not because it's forceful. Not because it tries to corner anyone. But because it whispers a question so deep that you cannot unhear it once it enters your mind. And the question is this: why is there a first-person perspective at all? Why is there an inner life? A point of view? A private world of thought and awareness? Inside a universe otherwise described by particles, equations, and impersonal laws? If consciousness were just another object in the universe, we could shrug, but it isn't. It is the medium through which every object is known. This is the beginning of a proof that even some atheists fear. Because once you follow it honestly, it leads not to religion, not to doctrine, but to something unavoidable. Something that feels like the universe looking back. This is the argument from consciousness. But not the version you've heard before. This is the version philosophers whisper about. Let's begin. Section 1. The strangest fact about reality. Imagine someone asked you, "Show me the most extraordinary thing in the universe." Where would your mind go? A supernova? A black hole? A galaxy thick with stars? But the most extraordinary thing in the universe is not out there. It's the fact that there is you experiencing any of it at all. Light hits your eyes, and suddenly there is color. Vibrations hit your ears, and suddenly there is music. Atoms form neural circuits, and suddenly there is meaning. There is a world. There is awareness. And here is the strange part. Nothing in physics predicts this. Nothing in chemistry requires it. Nothing in material processes explains why any of them should be accompanied by an inner world. The universe could have been cold, silent, and mindless. Just particles ricocheting forever. But instead, there is awareness. A private universe behind the skull. This is the strangeness that bothers so many thinkers. Because once you notice it, you also notice that consciousness refuses to fit into the material story we've told ourselves. And this is where the argument begins. Section 2. The first-person problem. There are two ways to describe the world. The first-person view. I feel pain. I see red. I long for something. I am aware. And the third-person view. Neurons fired. A signal was transmitted. A behavior occurred. But notice the gap. You can describe a brain from the outside. You can map every cell. Measure every chemical. Predict every behavior. And you will still have said nothing about what it feels like to be that brain. That feeling, that inner quality, is called qualia. And qualia is the one thing the third-person method cannot capture. Here is the unsettling truth. Consciousness is not made of matter. It is not extended in space. It has no weight, no volume, no location. Yet it is the most undeniable fact you have. You can doubt the world. You can doubt science. You can doubt logic. But you cannot doubt that you are experiencing something. This is why philosopher David Chalmers called consciousness the hard problem. But many philosophers privately call it something else. The immovable object. Because no matter how far material explanation goes, it stops right at the doorway of subjective experience. And what sits beyond that doorway is where this argument, and the fear around it, emerges. Section 3. Why consciousness can't be reduced. Let's try something simple. Think of the color red. Now imagine someone taking apart your brain and labeling every neuron involved. They could tell you, this cell fired. This circuit activated. But no number of neurons describes redness itself. The experience. What it is like. Material science describes structure and function. Consciousness is neither. This leads to one of the most important observations in the philosophy of mind. If a phenomenon cannot be described in physical terms, then it cannot be reduced to physical terms. And if it cannot be reduced to physical terms, then physicalism, the view that everything is purely physical, is incomplete. Not disproven. Just insufficient. Like a map that shows roads but not the terrain. Useful, but not the whole picture. This is precisely the point many atheists fear. Not because they dislike the conclusion, but because the argument does not attack their worldview. It simply shows them a piece of reality their worldview cannot contain. And that creates tension. Section 4, the paradox of explanation. Now we approach the first major pillar of the proof. In philosophy, every worldview must answer a simple question. What explains consciousness? There are only three possible answers. Consciousness emerges from matter. Consciousness is identical to matter. Consciousness is more fundamental than matter. The first two are the most popular, but watch what happens when we evaluate them honestly. Option 1. Consciousness emerges from matter. This is the standard view. Neurons interact and somehow, awareness appears. But there is a devastating problem. Nothing about matter predicts consciousness. Nothing about physical laws suggests it. Nothing about particle interactions requires it. Matter produces structure and behavior, not first-person experience. To say consciousness emerges from matter is simply to say, we don't know how it happens. This is not an explanation. It is a placeholder. Option 2. Consciousness is identical to matter. This theory claims consciousness just as brain activity. Here's the problem. If two things can be described completely differently and still exist in the same event, they are not identical. Brain states can be described objectively. Conscious states cannot. They have different properties, different criteria, different realities. Identity theory collapses under its own contradictions. Option 3. Consciousness is fundamental. And here is the moment that makes some atheists nervous. Because this final option suggests something profound. Consciousness is not a latecomer in the universe. It is woven into the fabric of reality itself. Not supernatural. Not mystical. Simply fundamental. Like time. Like space. Like energy. If consciousness is fundamental, then the universe is not a cold machine that accidentally woke up. It is a reality where mind is part of the ground floor. And this is the point where many critics quietly step back. Because if mind is fundamental, it raises a deeper question. What is the source of mind? Section 5. The mirror that exposes the gap. Imagine a room. Inside it sits a single lamp. The lamp can illuminate everything around it. The walls. The floor. Every object. But the lamp cannot illuminate its own power source. It can shine on everything except the thing that makes it shine. This is consciousness. It reveals the entire world. Yet cannot reveal the underlying principle that makes awareness possible. That principle cannot be found in neurons, or synapses, or atoms. Because those are the things consciousness illuminates. Not the thing that generates illumination. And this leads to the next pillar of the proof. Consciousness cannot explain itself. Its explanation must lie beyond it. This, beyond, is not supernatural. It is simply deeper than subjective experience. And deeper than material description. A layer below both. A foundation neither side can ignore. And for many atheist thinkers, that is where discomfort begins. Because the moment you allow that foundation to exist, you are no longer describing a purely physical universe. You are describing something else. Section 6. The uniqueness of the first-person perspective. Let's consider something subtle. In all of science, the one thing that cannot be observed is the observer. You can measure a brain, but not the self occupying it. You can study behavior, but not the inner life behind it. You can describe mechanisms, but not meaning. The first-person perspective is not an object. It is the condition for any object to appear. And this is the foundation of the argument. What explains the existence of subjectivity? Not the brain is a mechanism. Not evolution explains behavior. Not experience. Not physics describes interactions. not perspectives. Whatever creates subjectivity must have the capacity for awareness. In principle. And here is the difficult truth. If consciousness arises in the universe must contain the potential for consciousness. Which means, consciousness is not an anomaly. It is a clue, a hint, a signature, a whisper of something deeper. Section 7. The illusion escape hatch. Some philosophers try to avoid this conclusion with a bold claim. Consciousness is just an illusion. But illusions are things that appear to consciousness. You cannot say consciousness is an illusion. Because the very act of saying something is an illusion requires consciousness to be real. Denying consciousness is like trying to lift yourself by your own shadow. This is why the illusion theory collapses instantly. It removes the very foundation needed to assert anything at all. And so we return to the uncomfortable truth. Consciousness is real. And cannot be reduced. And cannot be explained by matter alone. So what remains? Something many thinkers do not like to admit. If a phenomenon cannot be explained within your worldview must expand. Section 8. The fundamental mind principle. Here we reach the heart of the proof. If consciousness cannot come from non-conscious matter, then the foundation of reality must contain something compatible with consciousness. Not personal. Not religious. Not supernatural. Just compatible. This is what philosophers call the mind-like principle of the universe. It does not claim the universe thinks. It does not claim the universe chooses. It only claims this. Subjectivity must arise from a deeper form of subjectivity. Not from pure objectivity. In other words, the roots of mind cannot be mindless. The ground of awareness cannot be unaware. This is the conclusion many atheists quietly acknowledge, but rarely speak about publicly. Because it shifts the entire landscape of metaphysics. It suggests that the physical world is not the most fundamental level of reality. It suggests that consciousness is not an accident. It suggests, well, you can draw your own conclusions. Section 9. The inescapability of the argument. Every worldview must answer one question. Why is there consciousness rather than none? If your answer is, because matter formed a brain, then the question becomes, and why does any brain produce experience at all? If your answer is, because of evolution, then the question becomes, and why would evolution produce inner experience instead of just behavior? If your answer is, it just does, then you have stopped explaining the world. Philosophically, scientifically, logically, you must account for this strange presence. This inner light. This first-person flame. And here is the inescapable point. A worldview that cannot contain consciousness cannot contain reality. Because consciousness is the one part of reality you are always directly aware of. This is the proof that even some atheists fear. Not because it defeats them, but because it requires them to loosen their grip on a purely material universe. And once you loosen that grip, everything changes. Section 10. The quiet confessions of great thinkers. You don't have to believe me. Listen to the atheists themselves. Thomas Nagel wrote, "Materialism is almost certainly false." David Chalmers said, "Consciousness cannot be explained by physical processes alone." Sam Harris, a neuroscientist and atheist, admitted, "You can't reduce consciousness to biology. It's the wrong approach." And physicist Erwin Schrödinger wrote, "The total number of minds in the universe is one." None of these men became religious. But they all saw the same crack in the wall. The same unignorable fact. The same doorway opening to something deeper. They did not reject materialism out of faith. They rejected it out of honesty. Because consciousness refuses to be swallowed by matter. Section 11. What this argument is not. This is important. This argument is not saying, therefore, God exists. It does not push you toward any religion. It does not smuggle in theology. It does not impose a worldview. It simply shows you the limits. of one particular worldview, and invites you to look beyond its walls. What you find beyond those walls is yours to discover. Some call it a deeper layer of reality. Some call it a metaphysical ground. Some call it the source of mind. Some call it being itself. Some call it nothing at all. The point is not to assign a name, but to recognize a fact. Consciousness is a window, and windows open into something. Section 12, the final step most people miss. Now we reach the step that transforms this argument from interesting to unsettling. Consider this. The universe produces consciousness. But consciousness is not physical. And non-physical properties cannot arise from purely physical causes. Therefore, the universe must contain something non-physical as part of its fundamental structure. And if the universe includes a fundamental, non-physical principle, then the universe is not purely material. This is the point that many atheists hesitate to cross. Not because they fear religion, but because they fear ambiguity. A purely physical universe is clean, simple, predictable. A universe with fundamental non-physical aspects is layered, stranger, more mysterious. But philosophy cares only for truth, not comfort. And the truth is, consciousness forces us to accept a richer universe than materialism can describe. Section 13, the moment of recognition. Close your eyes for a moment. Notice the space of awareness behind your thoughts. Notice how it is not located anywhere. Notice how it is not physical. Notice how it contains everything you perceive, yet is itself not contained. This awareness, this field of subjectivity, this invisible backdrop, is the most intimate thing you know, and the most mysterious thing in existence. And here is the final realization. You are not looking at consciousness. You are looking from it. This is why the argument is so powerful. It is not a theory to be debated. It is an experience you are having right now, with every breath, every moment, every thought. It is undeniable, irreducible, foundational, and whatever explains it must be at least as deep as consciousness itself. This is where the proof ends, and the mystery begins. The doorway. So what do we do with all this? We do not leap to conclusions. We do not cling to simple explanations. We do not weaponize philosophy. Instead, we stand before the mystery, like thinkers have for thousands of years, and let it ask its question. What makes consciousness possible? Whatever your answer, it will shape how you see everything else. Meaning, reality, purpose, identity, the universe. And perhaps, if you look long enough, you will sense what so many atheists, agnostics, and believers alike have sensed. Consciousness is not merely a feature of the universe. It is a clue, a quiet invitation, a doorway into something deeper than matter, and more intimate than thought. Something we do not fully understand, but cannot ignore. Thank you for walking into that doorway with me. Until next time.